The first sound at my mother's supper table was always the same, the soft scrape of every chair pulled in and a chorus of "Yes, ma'am" before a fork was lifted. That was the music I grew up on. Number 10 on this list taught me to meet a grown-up's eye. Number 8 turned a slammed door into a quiet one. And number 4 on this list fixed back talk in under a week. Those mothers drilled the little things daily, never yelling. So hit subscribe and let's lift the curtain, because here are 14 unwritten 1950s rules that kept every rude kid polite. Number 14, the rule about standing up. In my mother's house, when a grown-up stepped into the room, every child rose to their feet without being told twice. That was the same soft scrape of chairs I grew up on at the supper table, only now it meant respect for the person walking through the door. A neighbor, an aunt, the preacher, it did not matter. You stood, you said hello, and you stayed standing until you were waved back down. My mother taught it the quiet way. The first time my brother stayed slumped when our grandmother came in, she simply looked at him, then looked at the chair, and he was on his feet before she said a word. After that, the looking was enough. It worked fast because a child feels the eyes of the room the moment they are the only one still sitting. Nobody had to lecture. The discomfort did the teaching. And within a week, the standing became a habit none of us thought about. It said you mattered to a guest before a single word was spoken. Number 13, the yes ma'am and yes sir rule. There was no surer way to mark a polite child in 1955 than the two small words that followed every instruction. When a parent asked for something, the only answer in the air was yes ma'am or yes sir, never a grunt, never a shrug, and certainly never a why. My mother did not see it as cold. She saw it as a child, learning that an adult's word carried weight. The way she taught it was steady and gentle. If one of us answered with just a "yeah," she would pause, repeat the question, and wait. She never raised her voice. She simply did not move the conversation forward until the right words came back. That little wall of silence did more than any scolding ever could. A child wants the moment to keep going, wants the cookie or the trip to the store, so the missing words arrive quickly. Within a few days, yes ma'am stopped being a correction and started being the natural shape of how we spoke to grown folks. It traveled with us, too. Teachers noticed it. The lady at the 5 and dime noticed it. Even other mothers would remark on it, and my mother would just smile and say we were taught right. The phrase did something deeper than sound respectful. It slowed a child down half a second before answering, and in that half second the back talk had nowhere to land. A rude word needs a running start, and yes, ma'am took the running start away. There was respect built right into the rhythm of it, too. A child who answers an adult with care a dozen times a day starts to feel that care, not just say it. The words shaped the feeling, and not the other way around, which is the part most folks get backward. My mother understood that better than any parenting book on the shelf today. Teach the small courtesy first, she would say, and the bigger respect grows up underneath it like roots under a porch. That is why it tamed the sass so quickly, and why the manners outlasted the childhood that made them. Number 12, the hat off indoors rule. Step through any doorway in that era, and the first thing a boy did was reach up and take off his cap. Inside a house, a church, a shop, even at the dinner table, a covered head was simply not done. My father kept his felt hat on a hook by the door, and the hook hung low enough for the smallest boy to reach. That was on purpose. My mother believed a rule was easier to keep when the right thing to do was sitting right there at eye level. The teaching was almost wordless. The hook was low, the hat came off, and a small hand learned the motion before it ever learned the reason. When my youngest brother forgot once and sat down to supper with his ball cap still on, my mother did not say a thing. She just touched the brim with one finger, light as anything, and he understood. Off it came. Done. The reason behind it mattered as much as the motion. Keeping your hat on indoors used to suggest you were hiding something, that you did not mean to stay or be known. Taking it off said the opposite. It said, I am here, I am open, you can see my face. A child does not need that whole history to feel it. They feel the difference between a boy who hides under a brim and a boy who shows up bareheaded and ready. There was a tenderness in it as well. A boy who learns to bare his head at a doorway is learning in the smallest way to soften himself for the people inside. My mother knew that a manner this simple carried a lesson far heavier than its weight. It stuck fast because there was nothing to memorize, only a hook by the door and a hand that learned to reach. The hat came off, the head came up, and a polite boy walked into the room without ever being told to be one. Number 11, the napkin on the lap. Before a single fork was lifted at my mother's table, every child reached for the folded cloth beside the plate, shook it open, and laid it across their knees. Emily Post herself wrote that the one thing that truly mattered was that the napkin stay on your lap, and my mother ran her supper table by that very line. It was the small signal that the meal had begun and that you were ready to eat with care. She taught it as the very first move of the meal, before grace was even said. A napkin in the lap, hands in your own space, and you were ready. There was no speech attached. She just did it herself, every single night, with such ease that copying her felt as natural as breathing. A child learns more from watching a mother's hands than from any list of rules. If one of us forgot and left the napkin folded by the plate, she would catch our eye and give the smallest nod toward our lap. That was all. The cloth went where it belonged. Why did it work in under a week? Because it gave a fidgety child something to do with their hands the second they sat down. Idle hands at a table find trouble, reach for things, drum on the wood. The napkin gave those hands a job and a home. It also marked a line in a child's mind. The cloth on the lap meant the rough and tumble of the day was over and the quiet of the table had begun. That little ritual settled a room full of restless kids faster than any command ever could. Number 10, looking a grown-up in the eye. This is the one I promised you at the top. The rule that taught me to meet a grown-up's eye, and it changed how the whole world saw me. When you spoke to an adult in that era, or shook a hand, you looked them square in the face, no staring at your shoes, no mumbling at the floor. A clear gaze and a firm two-pump handshake told a grown-up everything they needed to know about how you were raised. My mother taught it with a small game when I was little. She would crouch down to my level, hold my chin so gently it was barely a touch, and lift it just until my eyes met hers. Then she would ask me a simple question and wait for me to answer while looking right at her. We did it at the door before company came. We did it before church. After a week of that gentle lift, my chin started staying up on its own. The handshake came along with it. She would have me practice on my father when he came home. Hand out, eyes up, 2 firm pumps, no wet fish grip, and no bone crusher either. He would pretend to be a stranger and shake back, and I would beam. It worked so quickly because a child loves the feeling of being met as an equal, even for a second. When a grown-up looks back and shakes your hand like you matter, something straightens up inside you. You want that feeling again, so you keep your eyes up to get it. The mumbling and the floor staring simply fell away, not because I was forced, but because looking up felt better than looking down. That is the quiet power in it. Number 9. Please and thank you. Here is the piece no one tells you about those two little words. They were not just polite decoration. They were the hinge the whole house turned on. Nothing crossed my mother's table without a please in front of it, and nothing left a hand without a thank you behind it. Pass the bread, please. Thank you, ma'am. It was as constant as the ticking of the clock on the wall. By the middle of that decade, etiquette writers and school teachers alike treated please and thank you as the very first manners a child should master, the foundation everything else was built on. My mother held to that completely. She taught it through the plate itself. If you asked for the potatoes without a please, the bowl simply did not move. She would not scold, would not sigh, would just keep eating as if she had not heard. The moment the please arrived, the bowl came sliding over warm and full. A hungry child learns that lesson in about 2 suppers flat, and the thank you was non-negotiable on the other end. No thank you meant the giving stopped. It was a clean, fair exchange that any little mind could follow. What I did not understand until I was grown was how much those 2 words were doing under the surface. Please made a child ask instead of demand, and a child who asks is a child who has already given up the tantrum before it starts. Thank you made a child notice the kindness coming their way, and a child who notices kindness has a harder time being rude to the hand that gives it. 2 words, repeated 100 times a day, quietly rewired how we treated every single person we met. That is why the old folks guarded them so fiercely. They were not teaching politeness. They were teaching a child to live in a world of give and take, and it took hold in under a week because the plate did the teaching 3 times a day without a single raised voice. Number 8. The quiet door rule. A slammed door was its own kind of backtalk in my mother's house, and she would not stand for it. When you came in or went out, the door closed soft behind you, held by the knob until the very last inch, never let to bang. A door that crashed shut announced a temper, and a temper announced poor raising. My mother taught the quiet door without a single lecture, the way she taught most things. The first time one of us let the screen door slam, she called us back, calm as still water, and asked us to walk through it again, this time closing it gently. Then a third time. By the third pass, the hand had learned to hold the knob, and the slamming was over for good. She used to say a house should sound peaceful, that you could tell a calm family by how their doors closed. It was never about the wood or the hinges. It was about teaching a child to carry their feelings without throwing them at the room. A door is the easiest thing in the world to slam when you are angry, and a child who learns to close it softly, even while upset, has learned to hold their temper in their own 2 hands. That is a far bigger lesson than it looks. It worked in under a week for a simple reason. A door is right there, used a dozen times a day, so the practice came thick and fast. Every trip outside was another chance to get it right, and a child who closes a door gently 12 times in a day has the habit set before the week is out. The slamming stopped, and so did a good deal of the storming and stomping that used to come with it. There was something else, too, that I only saw years later. A child who has learned to close one door softly has learned 100 other things by the same route. How to lower a voice, how to set a plate down without a clatter, how to leave a room without a scene. The gentle door was never really about the door. A quiet door, it turned out, made for a quiet child. Number 7. The thank you note rule. Whenever a gift came into our house, a birthday dollar from an aunt, a knitted scarf from a great-grandmother, my mother sat us down at the kitchen table with a sheet of stationery before the wrapping paper was even cleared away. In that era, the rule was firm. You wrote a thank you note by hand and got it in the mail within a day or two, never weeks later when the warmth had cooled. She taught it gently, the way she taught everything. She would sit beside me, not over me, and help me sound out the words. Your gift made me so happy. Thank you for thinking of me. My own crooked letters, my own pencil. She never wrote it for me. A child who pens their own thanks feels the gratitude travel down their arm and onto the page. That was the whole secret of it. It worked fast because the note forced a small heart to slow down and truly picture the person who had given. You cannot write thank you for the warm mittens without remembering Grandma's hands knitting them by the lamp. The remembering is what turned a careless child into a thankful one. And it happened in the time it took to lick a stamp. The world today fires off a quick text and calls it gratitude. My mother knew better. A note in your own hand, mailed before the gift lost its glow, taught a child that kindness deserves the effort of a reply. That little square of paper did more for a grateful heart than 100 reminders to say thanks. The pencil taught what the mouth never could. Number 6, calling every adult Mr. or Mrs. No grown-up in our whole town was ever a first name to a child. It was Mr. Anderson, Mrs. Caldwell, Miss Polk, the title and the last name together, every single time. To call an adult by their first name without being invited was simply unthinkable, the kind of thing that made a mother's face go pale at the supper table. My mother held that line without ever needing to raise her voice about it. The way she taught it was by hearing it and waiting. If I came running in and said Helen gave me a cookie, she would tilt her head just slightly, and I would catch myself fast. Mrs. Pruitt gave me a cookie. The pause was the whole lesson. She did not correct so much as let me hear my own mistake hanging in the air. A child fixes that quickly because nobody likes the sound of their own slip echoing back. It took hold inside a week for a plain reason. There was no decision to make. Every adult got the same title, so there was nothing to figure out, only a habit to wear in. And underneath the habit sat something bigger. A title puts a little distance between a child and a grown-up, and that distance is exactly where respect lives. A child who calls a woman Mrs. Caldwell cannot sass her the same way they would sass a Helen. The very name keeps the manners in place. That is why those old folks guarded the titles so. They knew the small word carried the whole weight. Number 5, holding the door for whoever came behind you. In my mother's world, you never let a door swing shut in another person's face, not for a lady, not for an old man with his arms full, not for anybody. You held it, you waited, and you let them through first. It was such a settled thing that men took real pride in it, stepping ahead to pull a door wide and standing there patient as a post until everyone had passed. My mother taught it to us as a kind of looking outward. She would say, "Before you walk through, see who is behind you." That one question turned a child's eyes off themselves and onto the world for half a second, and half a second is all manners ever needs. We practiced it at the church door, at the grocer, at our own front porch when company left. Hold it, wait, let them go first. It worked in under a week because a door is everywhere, used a dozen times a day, and every doorway became another chance to think of somebody else before yourself. A child who holds a door learns the first lesson of kindness, that other people are real and present and worth a moment of waiting. The selfish little rush to be first simply wore away. There was a quiet pride in it, too, the small, straight-backed satisfaction of a child who has just done a grown-up courtesy and been thanked for it. That thank you was sweeter than any candy. The held door made a giver out of a taker, one swing at a time. Number 4, never talking back to a grown-up. This is the one I promised you would fix backtalk in under a week, and it did every time. The rule was simple and old as the hills. A child did not contradict an adult, did not argue the point, did not get the last word. When a grown-up spoke, you listened, and if you disagreed, you held your tongue and waited to be asked. Sass had no door to walk through. My mother taught it without a lecture, the way she taught it all. The first time one of us shot back a "but that's not fair," she did not argue back, which is the trap most folks fall into today. She simply went quiet and still, looked at us steady and waited. No reply came until the right tone did. A child cannot have an argument all by themselves. With nobody to push against, the backtalk just collapsed under its own weight, and after 2 or 3 of those silences, the sass stopped trying. That is why it worked so fast. Backtalk needs a sparring partner, somebody to volley with, and my mother flat refused to play. The argument died for lack of an opponent. But there was tenderness folded into the rule, and this is the part people forget. Holding your tongue is not the same as having no voice. She always came back later, after supper, after the heat had passed, and asked us what we had wanted to say. Then she truly listened. So we learned the lesson twice over, that the moment of anger is not the moment to speak, and that a calm word, asked for and waited for, gets heard far better than a hot one thrown across the room. A child who learns to wait to be heard becomes a grown-up worth listening to. Number 3, giving up your seat to an elder. On the bus, on the streetcar, in a crowded waiting room, a child was on their feet the instant a grown-up came in looking for a place to sit. You did not wait to be asked. You stood, you offered the seat with a small, "Here you are, ma'am," and you held the pole and rode standing the rest of the way without a word of complaint. An older woman, a tired man, anyone with more years than you, they came first. My mother taught it by reading the room out loud when we were small. On the streetcar she would lean down and murmur, "See that lady with the cane, what do we do?" And I would pop up and offer my seat before she finished the question. After a few rides, the spotting became automatic. My eyes started hunting the car for somebody who needed the seat more than I did. It took only a week of riding because the lesson repeated itself every single trip, and every trip a child got to feel the warm flush of an old woman's "Thank you, dear." That feeling is what cemented it. A child who gives up a seat learns that comfort is something you share, not something you grab and guard. The me first that lives in every little one simply got crowded out by the habit of looking for who needed it more. And here is the quiet truth underneath. A child standing so an elder can sit is a child learning their own small strength is meant to carry others. The empty seat taught generosity better than any sermon. Number 2, asking to be excused from the table. No child in my mother's house ever just got up and wandered off when their plate was clean. You sat, you waited until the grown-ups had finished, and then you asked, plain and clear, "May I please be excused?" Only when the answer came, "Yes, you may," did you carry your plate to the sink and go. To slide out without asking was as good as saying your own belly mattered more than the table you all shared. My mother taught it as the closing bookend of every meal, the same way the napkin in the lap opened it. There was no speech. She simply did not respond to a child halfway out of their chair. The fidgeting boy who started to rise got nothing, no notice, no permission, until the words came out right. Then, warm as anything, "Yes, you may." A hungry-to-leave child learns that one in about 2 suppers, because the only road out of the chair ran straight through the asking. It worked so fast because the rule had a door, and the door had a key, and the key was 4 little words. but the meaning ran deeper than the manners. Asking to be excused taught a child that the meal belonged to everyone, not just to them, and that you do not leave the people you love sitting there until you have honored the time together with a simple question. It taught patience, it taught belonging, it taught a child to think of the table as a whole and not just their own seat at it. That is a heavy lesson carried on 4 light words. The asking turned a meal into something shared instead of something grabbed. Number 1. The proper introduction. When my mother brought a child face to face with a grown-up, there was a right way to do it, and we learned it cold. You said the older person's name first, then the younger, Mrs. Pruitt, "This is my son Tommy," and the child answered with a clear, "How do you do?" Not a mumble, not a wave. The words and the eyes together. A boy put out his hand to shake. My mother walked us through it before company ever arrived. Name first, hand out, look up, how do you do? After a handful of times, it stopped being a chore and started being a small, proud moment. A child who can introduce themselves well walks into any room a little taller. It worked because it gave a shy child a script to lean on, and a script beats a blank stare every time. The whole world opened up the day the words came easy. Start with just one of these tonight, the held door or the may I please, and watch how fast a little one rises to meet it. Not one of these rules took a raised voice. They took a mother who stayed steady and let the quiet do the teaching. Next time I will share the bedtime habits that sent every 1950s child off to sleep without a single battle. If Mama Hazel's stories feel like home to you, subscribe and pull up a chair with us. And tell me down in the comments, which of these rules did your own mother or grandmother hold you to? And do you wish you had kept it alive for your own little ones? Mama Hazel, signing off.